morning, Mary.
Good morning.
Mary Keefe.
Correct.
And what nationality is that?
Well, it's Irish. People tell me that it should be O'Keefe.
Yes.
Because in Ireland, the O'Keefes were royalty. And I've told people, well, if they make me a princess, I will put the O back on.
But you haven't gone that far in your
Not
investigation.
Yet. Actually, I'm mostly German. I'm about 3/4 German and 1/4 Irish.
And your mother's maiden name?
Rau.
Rau. Like R-A-U?
R-A-U-E.
R-A-U-E. And that is German?
Right. My grandfather, my mom's dad, who died when she was about 7 years old, came from Alsace-Lorraine.
Oh my. Was it a German or Irish settlement where you were born?
I think mostly German there.
Now, I was so surprised to hear that you weren't born in Chicago or Detroit or San Francisco, but...
I was born in Mitchell, South Dakota.
Oh my. And how did your parents happen to get to South Dakota?
Well, that's where they were born. That's where they were, where they grew up.
So your grandparents probably then were migrated to the United States?
My mom's dad had migrated. My great-grandfather, Keefe, came from Ireland, and I don't know anything about that history.
So what are your memories of South Dakota?
I left when I was with my parents when I was 3 years old, so I have no memories as a child being there, but I visited there 3 or 4 times, and I have cousins that were there, aunts and uncles, my grandparents.
Oh, how wonderful. That was a thrill, wasn't it?
Yes.
So your parents then migrated east, south?
To California.
Went west.
Correct.
Looking for oil?
I don't know what they were looking for, but my mother had 2 brothers who were already in Oakland, California, and Mom and Dad decided that that's where they wanted to go to.
Do you remember what form of travel? Or did they
no.
ever talk about that?
No.
Be interesting to know if they drove or took the train or, in those days. So Oakland, California, well, that was a huge change without you realizing it.
Correct,
Right?
yes.
Yes. So you grew up around the water, around the mountains, correct?
No, it's a city.
But isn't that near San Francisco?
Oh, right, yes.
Yes.
But it was all urban.
Yes. But you could get to the water.
Oh, definitely.
And you could see the mountains.
Right,
Yes. Did you have our sisters then in Oakland?
Yes. I went to Bishop O'Dowd High School, where our sisters taught.
But not great. You didn't have our sisters in...
No.
Any other Dominicans?
No. For grade school, I had Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet.
Aren't they from Missouri, St. Louis, Missouri?
Well, the
originally?
ones that I had, I think, were headquartered in Los Angeles, as I remember.
Who were some of your teachers at O'Dowd?
Well, Sister Mary Ardice, Sister Romaine Gregory, Sister Catherine Emery, Sister Jean Treese. I had choir with her, which I enjoyed very much.
So did one of the sisters influence you, or how did your vocation spark come about?
I have a myth story about my vocation, and whether this really happened or not, it's true. When I was about 4 years old, I would go with my mom shopping, and she would frequently stop at St. Elizabeth's Church and light a candle. And one day, a sister walked through the church while we were there, and I said to my mom, I want to be one of those. Now, this is a story that my mom told me after I had been in the convent for many years. Now, I don't know if she made it up or what, but for me, it is a true story. I always wanted to be a sister. We didn't have any sisters in the immediate family. I didn't really know what they did, even though I had them as teachers. I never talked with any of them about it. It was just a heartfelt need to do this.
Oh my. And the sister you saw in St. Elizabeth, was she in a dark habit or a white habit?
Well, I know that the San Jose Dominicans taught at St. Elizabeth's for decades and decades. So I guess that it was a San Jose Dominican, but I have no memory of this at all. It's a
very
story.
Nice myth.
It is. It's. I love it.
So, did you finish high school and then decide to enter, or was it?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
When I got to be a senior, I knew that I'd better start doing something specific about this if it was going to happen. And so I talked with one of the sisters about it, and of course they had no idea that I even had a desire to do this. And one time somebody asked me, why did you join the Adrians? And I said, well, because they were there. That's how it happened. That's how it happened. And then I
you probably
wrote the letter.
Yeah.
I remember Sister Mary Ardice helping me with filling in the form. And I got to the part where it said, why do you want to enter? And I remember looking at Sister Mary Ardice and saying, what do I put here? Because I couldn't really put into words why I wanted to do it. She said, I think, love God and help other people. And I said, okay. So I wrote that down on my form.
Oh my. So did your parents bring you to Adrian then?
No. There were 3 of us entering from Bishop O'Dowd High School. Pam Huppert and Colleen Nam and I. And one of the families, to this day I have no idea who, made plane reservations for the 3 of us. And so we got on the airplane and flew to Chicago. And then there were some sisters in Chicago that picked us up at the airport and took us to the convent. I have no memory of what convent or what sisters. I remember going out on the town in Chicago at night, but I can't remember what we did. And then the sisters drove us into Adrian then on September the 8th, 1960.
Oh, yeah. The Feast of Our Lady. It was nice having 2 other young women.
Yes.
That you could share this adventure with, because it really was.
Very much
yes,
so.
From the busy city metropolis
Yes.
of Oakland to the cornfields of Adrian. Yes. And did you have your black postulant outfit already?
Oh, yes. I had gotten a letter, and it, this and this and this, and this is what you're to bring. And my mom made my skirt, and then also the blouse, and then we had the cape that we wore. And I remember my mom saying, now that cape is going to be the thing that shows. And she wasn't a real good seamstress. She could do the basics. But she asked somebody else to make the capes so that the hem around the cape would be nice and straight.
Oh my! And did you wear those on the plane?
Oh no, no.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay. And who was here to greet you when you arrived in Adrian?
Well, what I remember of that first day, I don't even remember putting on the postulant's outfit. But what I do remember is that there were a lot of people wearing black and a lot of people wearing white. And at one point in time, it seemed like everyone was headed somewhere, so I joined up with them. And I was by myself in terms of getting there. And when I got near chapel, there was this old sister who stopped me, and there were parlors near the entrance of chapel at that time, and she took me into the parlor, and she said something like, "How are you? Are you all right? Are you doing all right?" And afterwards, I found out that that was Sister Benedicta Marie.
Oh my, how dear of her.
Yes, very much so. I remember that kindness.
So after your postulancy and novitiate, what name were you given as a novice?
I was given the name Ardice, and the A-R-D is from Willard, my father's name, and the I-C-E is from Alice, my mother's name.
Oh, that was unique.
Yes.
Yes.
I think by that time they were rather desperate for single names.
Had anyone through the years when you were using that name ask you what saint you were named after?
No, no one asked me, but I had a cover story because I figured if it ever came up, I would do it. And I looked up in a saint's book, and there is a Saint Ardo, and a man. And so my cover story was, Ardice is the feminine form of Ardo. You know. And my feast day was Christ the King, because that was my title. We got titles in those days.
Yes. Oh, how wonderful. Were you ever fortunate enough to be missioned back to California?
Oh, yes.
Right away?
No. I made profession in 1962. And then taught in Iron Mountain, Michigan, Henderson, Nevada, and Inkster before going to California. I was missioned to California, to Santa Cruz, in 1969.
And never left.
Correct. Well, I was there for almost 40 years.
40 years.
Yes.
Mostly around the northern part of California?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What were some of your favorite places?
Santa Cruz, I taught at Holy Cross School there. I would say that was my best experience of community. I was there from 69 to 75. And I heard sisters say how awful those years were, how terribly, terribly difficult. And they were in many ways. Many changes were made. Hundreds of sisters left the congregation during those years, but there were some sisters at Santa Cruz who had mental and physical problems, but there was a core of us who really knew who we were, what we were about, supported one another.
How beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And as I recall, you spent several years in religious education, did you not?
Yes, about 20 years total in 2 different parishes.
That would have been after Vatican II.
Right.
So you were able to teach the documents, correct?
Right.
Oh,
yeah.
What a joy.
Yes.
What a joy. Yes. And trained catechists, no
right.
doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, what brought you back in this direction, back east?
Well, in 2006, I told the pastor where I was doing religious education that I would finish out the school year, but then I was gone. I always like to tell people way ahead of time that I'm leaving. I always thought that was only fair. And then I thought, well, if I'm going to do something different, this is the time to do it. And I'd still have energy and health. And then I received a call from Kathy Nolan asking me if I would consider going to New Orleans the congregation at that time was putting together a community to live in New Orleans and minister to the people of that area. And so I didn't pass up the opportunity. And in August of '07, Kitty Bethay and Kathy Nolan and Lee Cooney and I went to New Orleans. Some other sisters had gone previously to see whether or not they were interested in going there. And
this was at the time of or after Katrina?
After. This was 2 years after Katrina.
Yes, which devastated how many people? Did you ever know how many?
Well, I know that New Orleans had a population of somewhere between 350 and 400,000 people, and New Orleans was flooded to 80%. And the area where I was going to be working, St. Bernard Civil Parish, had a population of about 70,000, and it was flooded to 100%.
Oh my. When you say St. Bernard, you're talking about like a province
Like
or a region?
A county.
A county.
Louisiana's counties are called parishes.
So they all have a saint's name?
No,
Okay.
they don't.
Uh-huh.
But my understanding is that when the United States purchased the Louisiana Territory in 1803, that the people in what is now the state of Louisiana asked if they could continue to call their counties parishes as a connection to their past.
Yes.
And my guess is that the area was divided according to church parishes,
Yes.
and that's how it came about.
It sounds like Chicago because people talk about where they live by the parish.
Yes.
By the parish.
Mm-hmm.
Did you not, before you went to New Orleans, did you not investigate another ministry suggested by the congregation?
Yes.
Up north?
Right. Talk about an extreme. Donna Markham asked me if I would consider going to Ketchikan, Alaska, where we already had 2 sisters ministering there. And to check out every possibility.
Yes.
And so I did visit there, but God told me that this is not the place for you.
Yes. And Louisiana was.
And God told me that Louisiana was.
Yeah. What ministry did you involve yourself in when you first went to New Orleans?
Well, they were the Eucharistic missionaries of St. Dominic, who are now Dominican Sisters of Peace, had been working in St. Bernard Civil Parish for many, many, many years. And they really wanted a sister to be with the people in St. Bernard Civil Parish. And the Eucharistic missionaries had gotten a grant from the Cincinnati Charities to pay a stipend to a sister who would come. So I was going to investigate that possibility.
And that would mean knocking on doors
Exactly.
and visiting people, see what their needs were.
Right.
Yes. And letting them know what is available.
Right, yes. I made a brochure that listed places where people could get help, contact numbers for many different kinds of services. And I just literally went from house to house to house, introduced myself, said, here is some information that you can use, and then that was my entree.
I'm Sister Mary, probably.
I'm Sister Mary from the Catholic Church.
Oh, what a joy. But how sad that must have been, too, to see the situation that so many people were living in.
Right, oh yes. It was, many times it was just heartbreaking. But the resiliency of those people is amazing. in New Orleans, the New Orleans area, I would say particularly New Orleans and St. Bernard Civil Parish, have an extraordinary sense of place in that they want to be there. And even to the point of where they want to be living on a particular street.
Wow.
Because that's where their parents and grandparents and great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents lived in that area. And a very strong family connection. And one of the tragedies of Katrina is that the families were split up. Mm-hmm. And I can remember talking to a woman who was just so sad because one of her children lived so far away. And I said, well, where did they live? And, oh, they live way over, it takes 45 minutes to get there. And I thought, well, in some place like California, 45 minutes is practically next door. But for those people, so many of them literally lived next door. Mm-hmm. And it was a great hardship. Mm-hmm. I remember talking to one man who was fixing up his house, and he said, my mother used to live 20 minutes up the road, and I would pass the homes of over 100 relatives on my way to visit my mother.
Oh my.
And so
that tells you, yeah.
Right, yeah. It was one of the great tragedies.
Did you live with the sisters, the Eucharistic sisters?
Yes.
Dominican sisters?
I lived with them for 3 months. And then very soon after I had visited in August, the congregation purchased a house. And so I got there in November of '07, but the house wasn't ready yet. Mm-hmm. Oh, and also, I didn't want to live there by myself.
Right.
And there was no furniture in there. And so I waited. And then in February of '08, Diane Odette came to live, and then Lee Cooney, and she brought a van full of furniture. And so then once the house got settled, then Diane always lived there, and then I moved over right away.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. I always associate you with the nuns' build, inviting sisters to come down for whatever length of time they wanted. How did that get started, or what was the light bulb that went off in your heart and mind?
When I was asking about organizations that help people for the brochure, I heard about the St. Bernard Project, which is an organization that takes existing houses that have a good foundation, a good roof, and it's structurally sound. They gut the houses and then rehab them using volunteers. So one day when I was visiting them, they were having a women's build. And I asked, well, what's that?
What's women's build?
Right. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, we invite women to come for a week, and it's the idea of publicizing the work that the St. Bernard Project is doing. And so I said, well, just what about a nun's build? Okay. And it was completely out of character for me to do that. But once again, I knew that it was God saying, Mary, go for it. So I started to advertise it. The sisters across the country responded. And then as the years went by, more and more friends of the sisters, relatives, associates came. So the fall of '09 was the first build, and it is still going on.
Oh my. And during your time there were somewhere around 400 or 500
About
sisters?
while I was still there,
Yeah.
they were both friends, relatives, associates, and sisters. There were about 400 people who had participated, and I was there for about 6 builds, and then many people came more than once.
But the beauty that I know is, was it last year or the year before, you were honored by an award
Yes.
in New Orleans.
Right,
And
yes.
you and your sister,
Yes,
right?
we
Your
went.
one and only sister,
Yes.
right?
Yeah,
What is her name?
Karen.
Karen, yes.
Karen.
And she lives.
In California,
Mhm.
near San Francisco, with her husband.
So were you surprised about this lovely honor?
I was completely taken aback. I got an email saying, you are going to be receiving, we would love to have you come and receive this award. And I found out, well, maybe this is a scam. So I looked it up on the internet, and it was a real organization, the National Catholic Development Association. And so I called them up, and they said, we'd love to have you come to Disney World, and you can have somebody come with you.
Oh, my. So that's where the ceremony took
Right.
place. Who nominated you?
It was an Amityville Dominican who had heard about the project from another Amityville Dominican, Sister Joan Donovan, who had spent an enormous amount of time visiting people and working with the people in the New Orleans area, and was a part of Nuns Build every year.
Well, let me thank you in the name of the congregation for your compassion and your creativity, because there was a lot of organization that would have happened in this Nuns Build, and for all the people whose lives you've affected, not only in teaching, but more recently with the victims of that terrible flood that we call Katrina. Katrina. You're living in Weber now.
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
Happily so.
Very much
Yes,
so.
yes, yes.
I've been here for 3 years, and I love it here.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much for